Jai Jai Shri Caitanya, Jai Nityananda, Jai Advaita Chandra, Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Let's get into Dham. Let's go to that. The orange medals to the actor. That card, so most most for kicsit elfelé. How's that?
I'm not a fan of fans. Unless it's 35 degrees.
How's that? Can you feel anything?
That's better. Thank you.
Let's get some moving here. Okay. Well, greetings to all of our viewers. And there's the translation. There's a separate Hungarian translation going on also somewhere. I'm not sure where. Oh, upstairs in the baby's room. And we're getting good feedback. This is going to be our last day we're dealing with this one Maharaja. And also wanted to just inform everyone that since we've had these classes this week, I won't be giving a class on Sunday now. I'm just losing lots of time from my writing, so I need to make it up. And then I'll be crying in separation from Maharaja.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you. Okay, now you should be able to hear me better because we were disconnected before.
Okay. Madhya Lila, Chapter 2, Text 53. When Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu would see Jagannatha along with Balarama and Subhadra, he would immediately think that he had reached Kurukshetra, where all of them had come. He would think that his life was successful because he had seen the lotus-eyed one, whom, if seen, pacifies the body, mind, and eyes. Staying near the Garuda Stamba, the Lord would look upon Lord Jagannatha. What can be said about the strength of that love? On the ground beneath the column of the Garuda Stamba was a deep ditch, and that ditch was filled with the water of his tears. Purport. In front of the temple of Jagannatha is a column on which the statue of Garuda is situated. It is called the Garuda Stamba. At the base of that column is a ditch, and that ditch was filled with the tears of the Lord. When coming from the Jagannath temple to return to his house, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu used to sit on the ground and mark it with his nails. At such times, he would be greatly morose and would cry, "Alas, where is Vrindavan? Where is Krishna, the son of the king of the cowherd men? Where is that person who plays the flute? Ha ha, Kahan Vrindavan, Kahan Gopendra Nandana, Kahan Se Vamshi Vadan. Where is Vrindavan? Where is Krishna, the son of the king of the cowherd men? Where is that person who plays the flute? Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu used to lament by saying, where is Sri Krishna, whose form is curved in 3 places? Where is the sweet song of his flute? And where is the bank of the Yamuna? Where is the rasa dance? Where is that dancing, singing, and laughing? Where is my Lord, Madan Mohan, the enchanter of Cupid? In this way, various ecstatic emotions evolved, and the mind of Caitanya Mahaprabhu filled with anxiety. He could not escape even for a moment. In this way, because of fierce feelings of separation, his patience began to totter, and he began to recite various verses. Amunya dhanyani dhanantarani haretvad alokanam antarena anata bandho karunaika sindho ha hanta katam nayami. O my Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, O friend of the helpless, you are the only ocean of mercy. Because I have not met you, my inauspicious days and nights have become unbearable. I do not know how I shall pass the time. Purport. This is a verse from Krishna Caritamrita by Bilva Mangala Thakur. All these inauspicious days and nights are not passing, for I have not met you. It is difficult to know how to pass all this time. But you are the friend of the helpless and an ocean of mercy. Kindly give me your audience, for I am in a precarious position. In this way, the Lord's restlessness was awakened by ecstatic feelings, and his mind became agitated. No one can understand what course such ecstasy would take. Because Lord Chaitanya could not meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, his mind burned. He began to ask Krishna about the means by which he could reach him. Twachchai shavam tri bhuvanad bhutamit machchapalam cha tavava mama vadigamyam tat kim karomi vilalam murali vilasi mugdam mukambhujam udikshitum ikshanabhyam. O Krishna, O flute player, the sweetness of your early age is wonderful within these 3 worlds. You know my unsteadiness, and I know yours. No one else knows about this. I want to see your beautiful, attractive face somewhere in a solitary place. But how can this be accomplished? This is another quote from Krishna Caritamrita of Bilva Mangala Thakur. My dear Krishna, only you and I know the strength of your beautiful features, and because of them, my unsteadiness. Now, this is my position. I do not know what to do or where to go. Where can I find you? I am asking you to give directions.
So, Matchapalam, Bilamangal Thakur's poetry can be recognized when you read it. It's really so outstanding and flows so beautifully. O Krishna, O flute player, the sweetness of your early age is wonderful within these three worlds. You know my unsteadiness, and I know yours. No one else knows about this. I want to see a beautiful, attractive face somewhere in a solitary place, but how can this be accomplished? So the next verse describes at least her unsteadiness. Only you and I know the strength of your beautiful features, and because of them, my unsteadiness. In other words, I become completely overwhelmed by Madhuri Bala, strength of sweetness, although it's not here in the translation, but it's there in the word for word, strength of sweetness. That, what was I was just explaining that indescribable beauty is called sweetness. Or sweetness is when beauty is indescribable. So, okay, I become, Radharani says, I become unsteady because of your beauty. That doesn't say anything about why he becomes unsteady, or exactly what that unsteadiness is. Mora Chapala, impotence.
No one else knows about this. It's really a private affair.
Well, except that it's on the pages of Caitanya Caritamrita.
But that it's on the pages, does that mean that, well, we know something, but...
I mean, some people are going to get curious. And if we're talking about his beauty, then certainly her beauty also matches. But as far as, what actually unsteadiness is, he just gives this one verse. Anyway, then there's the next verse. Because of the various kinds of ecstasy, contradictory states of mind occurred, and this resulted in a great fight between different types of ecstasy. Anxiety, impotence, humility, anger, and impatience were all like soldiers fighting, and the madness of love of God was the cause. I mean, these are all, when I'm reading, I'm just following, these are all like symptoms of Vyabhichari Bhav that Prabhupada just sort of nicely translates all of these states of mind of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that when similar ecstasies from separate causes meet, they are called Swarup Sandhi. When opposing elements meet, whether they arise from a common cause or different causes, their conjunction is called Bina Rupa Sandhi, the meeting of contradictory ecstasies. The simultaneous joining of different ecstasies, fear and happiness, regret and happiness, is called meeting, Sandhi. The word Shabalya refers to different types of ecstatic symptoms combined together, like pride, despondency, humility, remembrance, doubt, impatience caused by insult, fear, disappointment, patience, and eagerness. The friction that occurs when these combine is called shabalya. Similarly, when the desire to see the object is very prominent, or when one is unable to tolerate any delay in seeing the desired object, the incapability is called outsukya, or eagerness. If such eagerness is present, one's mouth dries up and he becomes restless. He also becomes full of anxiety, and hard breathing and patience are observed. Similarly, the lightness of heart caused by strong attachment and strong agitation of the mind is called impotence, chapalya. Failure of judgment, misuse of words, and obstinate activities devoid of anxiety are observed. Similarly, when one becomes too angry at the other party, offensive and abominable speech occurs, and this anger is called rosha. When one becomes impatient due to being scolded or insulted, the resultant state of mind is called amarsha. In this state of mind, one perspires, acquires a headache, fades in bodily color, and experiences anxiety and an urge to search out the remedy. The bearing of a grudge, aversion, and chastisement are all visible symptoms. Well, it's quite complex.
What would the so-called average devotee reader make of this, and how to feel motivated to go on reading such complexities that seem to have little immediate relevance to one's spiritual advancement at certain stages?
There are places in Kaviraj Goswami says that one should just continue hearing, even whether you understand or don't understand. Just keep hearing, and the effect of what you hear will have its what you hear will have its effect, and in due course of time. But we should just have faith that here is some transcendental subject matter that's certainly relevant. Perhaps it may not be immediately relevant to me, although it's not irrelevant. It's just knowledge that's sort of beyond our, number one, comprehension, and the other one is realization.
What you're saying reminds me of Prabhupada's instructions in the early days of ISKCON about how to read Nectar of Devotion, summary study, of course, of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He said, when you read it, just keep reading, and not every line you can't understand and you say, Swamiji, what is this? Swamiji, what is that? So just keep reading, and gradually you'll realize.
I've been thinking that, just because I'm referring a lot to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, how when Prabhupada received initiation, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told him to study Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That's in the Lila Mrita, Prabhupada Lila Mrita. I don't know where it comes from, but so that emphasis there of we should know the science of devotion, and then if Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is difficult, then wait till you take the next book.
Ujjwala Neelam.
Yeah. No, yeah. In one sense, it's not difficult, it's just so technical.
Yes. So many categories and subcategories.
Defining what is love of Godhead, the effects of love of Godhead, these symptoms,
Because Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is so important, so crucial, the BBT is taking years to produce a definitive version, because we're trying to get it right for the ages, and it's a lot of work.
Mm. With Saint Vishwanath Chakravarti and
Jiva Goswami and whatever is there from Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually did commentary, or he just commented on some verses?
He just commented on some verses, as Prabhupada started to do it and then stopped.
Prabhupada started to do
Excuse
commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita?
Yes, he started it.
When was that?
When?
Before or after Nectar of Devotion?
I don't know exactly, but in Los Angeles I had his manuscript pages of when he started it, and he did about 5 or 6 verses, if I can remember, long commentaries. I don't know the exact date, whether it was before Nectar Devotion or after. Of course, Nectar Devotion, how when you read Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, so huge, and how from that Prabhupada just so inconceivably got Nectar of Devotion in one volume. It's just amazing.
I think I've told you, for me, the Waves of Devotion by
Danudhara
Maharaj is unbelievably helpful.
Yes, I also use it.
It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I told him as much. It was indispensable. The body of the Lord was just like a field of sugar cane into which the mad elephants of ecstasy entered. There was a fight amongst the elephants, and in the process the entire field of sugar cane was destroyed. This transcendental madness was awakened in the body of the Lord, and he experienced despondency in mind and body. In this ecstatic condition, he began to speak as follows. Hey Deva, hey Daitya, hey Bhuvanaika Bandho, hey Krishna, hey Chapala, hey Kuranaika Sindho, hey Nata, hey Ramana, hey Nayan Abhirama, ha ha kada nu bhavitasi padam trishor me. O my Lord, O dearest one, O only friend of the universe, O Krishna, O restless one, O ocean of mercy, O my Lord, O my enjoyer, O beloved to my eyes, alas, when will you again be visible to me? This is text 40 of Krishna Caritamrita. The symptoms of madness served as an impetus for remembering Krishna. The mood of ecstasy awoke love, disdain, defamation by words, pride, honor, and indirect prayer. Thus Sri Krishna was sometimes blasphemed and sometimes honored. Purport. The word unmad is explained in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as extreme joy, misfortune, and bewilderment in the heart due to separation. Symptoms of unmad are laughing like a madman, dancing, singing, performing ineffectual activities, talking nonsense, running, shouting, and sometimes working in contradictory ways. The word pranaya is explained thus. When there is a possibility to receive direct honor, but it is avoided, that love is called pranaya. Sri Rupa Goswami in his Ujjvala Nilamani explains the word man thus. When the lover feels novel sweetness by exchanging hearty, loving words, but wishes to hide his feelings by crooked means, man is experienced. I mean, even some of these symptoms are things that we don't experience, but so many altogether, laughing like a madman, dancing, singing, performing ineffectual activities, talking nonsense, running, shouting, and sometimes working in contradictory ways is altogether is really extraordinary. We don't have experience usually. I mean, how many symptoms do you experience at one time? If you're dancing and singing, okay, but at the same time to be performing another half dozen activities, even if they're not simultaneous, but in sequence, it's unmad, meaning becomes maddened.
A fight amongst the mad elephants, destroying the whole sugarcane field.
It's a far example. You become devastated. My dear Lord, you are engaged in your pastimes, and you utilize all the women in the universe according to your desire. You are so kind to me. Please divert your attention to me, for by fortune you have appeared before me. You want to go ahead, 68.
My dear Lord, you attract all the women of the universe, and you make adjustments for all of them when they appear. You are Lord Krishna, and you can enchant everyone. But on the whole, you are nothing but a debauchee. Who can honor you? My dear Krishna, your mind is always restless. You cannot remain in one place, but you are not at fault for this. You are actually the ocean of mercy, the friend of my heart. Therefore, I have no reason to be angry with you. Seems like things have shifted from being accusatory to being submissive. I sometimes wonder about, my dear Lord, you attract all the women of the universe and you make adjustments for all of them when they appear. What exactly are those adjustments?
What's all that attracting all the women of the universe? I mean, here's a lot of women in the universe. How attracted are they? What about the men? But anyway, at least these women are attracted to one degree or another. But, you know, what about all the Carmi women walking down the street and in Budapest and elsewhere? Are they attracted? Have you heard of Krishna? I guess it's just an expression of love. And then you say, what was your question?
About the adjustments, samadhana, adjustments. You make adjustments for all of them when they appear. So you track all the women of the universe, and then when they appear, you sort them out some kind of way, or you make some kind of adjustment to them in their situation. So again, you could say this is expression of love, that you're attracting all the women in the universe, and then you're able to facilitate them.
Krishna can either expand before them all like he does at the rasa dance, or at least be present in front of them all. I think that they're all have his attention. In other words, pacify all of them so that they're just thinking that yes, Krishna is with me.
So we go from the accusatory. You can enchant everyone, but on the whole, you're nothing but a debauchee. Who can honor you? Your mind is always restless. You can't remain in one place. But then the switching gears. But you are not at fault for this. You're actually the ocean of mercy, the friend of my heart. Therefore, I have no reason to be angry with you.
It's madness. Then you don't try and follow the words of someone who's just lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Even sometimes you encounter some people who are a little unhinged, and it just doesn't make any sense what they say. First they say this, and then they say an opposite thing.
My dear Lord, you are the master and the life and soul of Vrindavana. Kindly arrange for the deliverance of Vrindavana. We have no leisure hours away from our many activities. Actually, you are my enjoyer. You have appeared just to give me happiness, and this is one of your expert activities.
Just unrelated comments. If they don't connect, it doesn't make a good paragraph.
We have no leisure hours away from our many activities.
Yeah. Actually, you're my enjoyer. Just doesn't follow on. You've appeared just to give me happiness, and this is one of your expert activities.
Purport. The word Vaidagdhya means that one is very expert, learned, humorous, cunning, beautiful, and skilled in manifesting caricatures.
Caricatures?
Funny faces.
Really?
Imitating someone.
Mm-hmm.
Taking my words as defamation, Lord Krishna has left me. I know that he's gone, but kindly hear my prayers in praise. You are the satisfaction of my eyes. You are my wealth and my life. Alas, please give me your audience once again. There were different transformations of the body of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Being stunned, trembling, perspiring, fading away of color, weeping, and choking of the voice. In this way, his whole body was pervaded by transcendental joy. As a result, sometimes Caitanya Mahaprabhu would laugh, sometimes cry, sometimes dance, and sometimes sing. Sometimes he would get up and run here and there, and sometimes fall on the ground and lose consciousness.
I'm thinking that Swarup Damodar Goswami, Ramananda Roy were really the only persons who were present when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was exhibiting these ecstasies. Makes one think that aside from other reasons, one is that no one else could really tolerate these or know how to respond. I mean, they were very expert in sort of nurturing and directing Lord Chaitanya's feelings and moods, but at the same time, when all these very extreme things that really don't make sense, even his devotees, even the advanced devotees, I mean, they weren't there. Could they have responded to such things when they heard them or saw them?
Well, that reminds me of after Lord Chaitanya saw that Chataka Parvat, the sand dune, and saw Govardhan Hill as the sand dune, or saw the sand dune as Govardhan Hill, and raced towards it, suddenly just took off running, and all the devotees ran after him. And then Lord Chaitanya was explaining what happened, and the elder devotees, like Brahmananda Puri, they finally caught up. And when Lord Chaitanya saw the elder devotees, he became more moderated, shall we say. This also reminds me of a point we discussed Sunday, or whatever day it was, in Budapest, from Shyamsundar Prabhu's memoirs with Prabhupada. I was repeating that, how Prabhupada's first visit to Mexico City brought out hundreds of persons, and the local culture there is very expressive compared to, perhaps you might say, European culture. And so there were just hundreds of persons, joyous, very outwardly joyous, and finally Prabhupada got off the Vyasasana to go to his room, and so many persons were crowding the stairways, getting a last look before Prabhupada went to his quarters for the night. And there was an old lady, and she was manifesting some partial ecstatic symptoms. She was laughing one moment and then crying the next moment, then laughing one moment and crying the next moment. And Prabhupada, according to Shyamsundar, turned to Shyamsundar Prabhu and said, "She should be initiated tomorrow." Purport. So we're getting more Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 8 kinds of transcendental changes taking place in the body are described. Stamba, being stunned, refers to the mind's becoming transcendently absorbed. In that state, the peaceful mind is placed on the life air, and different bodily transformations are manifest. These symptoms are visible in the body of an advanced devotee. When life becomes almost inactive, it is called stunned. The emotions resulting from this condition are joy, fear, astonishment, moroseness, and anger. In this condition, the power of speech is lost, and there is no movement in the hands and legs. Otherwise, being stunned is a mental condition. Many other symptoms are visible on the entire body in the beginning. These are very subtle, but gradually they become very apparent. When one cannot speak, naturally one's active senses are arrested, and the knowledge-acquiring senses are rendered inoperative. Kampa, trembling of the body, is mentioned in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as a result of a special kind of fear, anger, and joy. This is called Vepatu, or Kampa. When the body begins to perspire because of joy, fear, and anger combined, this is called Sweda. Vaivarnya is described as a change in the bodily color. It is caused by a combination of moroseness, anger, and fear. When these emotions are experienced, the complexion turns pale and the body becomes lean and thin. Ashru is explained in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as a combination of joy, anger, and moroseness that causes water to flow from the eyes without effort. When there is joy and there are tears in the eyes, the temperature of the tears is cold, but when there is anger, the tears are hot. In both cases, the eyes are restless, the eyeballs are red, and there is itching. These are all symptoms of ashru. When there is a combination of moroseness, astonishment, anger, joy, and fear, there is a choking in the voice. This choking is called gadgada. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu refers to gadgada hridaya gira, or a faltering voice. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Pulaka is described as joy, encouragement, and fear. When these combine, the hairs on the body stand on end, and this bodily state is called Pulaka.
It seems that Kaviraj Goswami is just like going through Sattvika Bhavas, Vyabhachari Bhavas, and he's mentioning them at least all in the context of what Lord Chaitanya's mental state and expressions are all about. Although he doesn't get into describing them in detail, he leaves that to the commentators. But it's like they're just all one after the other. He's introducing these according to things that the Lord said or he did. I don't know, maybe it's a duty of composition, of the composition of rasa. I don't know, it just appears very much that everything's just coming out right in the very beginning.
Everything's coming down, right?
Well, he's just mentioning everything, really, just, here it is, Stamba, Kampa, Prasveda, Vairanya, Ashru, Swara, Veda, and up to now, all of these verses are elaborate, are more of the same. He just sort of like mentions them all. He mentions all these different bhavas, anubhavas. I'm just sort of following the Bengali. Murchana, that's your next one. Murchana, Haila, Sakshatkara, Huhunkara. Anyway.
Okay. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was thus unconscious, he happened to meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, he got up and immediately made a tumultuous sound, very loudly declaring, "Now Krishna, the Great Personality, is present." In this way, because of Krishna's sweet qualities, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made different types of mistakes in his mind. Thus, by reciting the following verse, he ascertained the presence of Lord Krishna. So another verse from Krishna Caritamrita. Mara Swayam Nu Madhura Jyuti Mandalam Nu Madhuryam Eva Nu Mano Nayanamritam Nu Vaini Mrijo Nu Mama Jivata Vallabho Nu Krishnoyam Abhyudayate Mama Lochanaya. In the attitude of Radharani, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu addressed the gopis. My dear friends, where is that Krishna, Cupid personified, who has the effulgence of a kadamba flower, who is sweetness itself, the nectar of my eyes and mind? He who loosens the hair of the gopis, who is a supreme source of transcendental bliss and my life and soul. Has he come before my eyes again? Purport, this is another verse from Krishna Caritamrita.
Lord Chaitanya liked Krishna Caritamrita.
Yeah.
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then would begin to talk like this. Is Cupid personified, present with the effulgence and reflection of the Kadamba tree? Is he the same person, personified sweetness, who is the pleasure of my eyes and mind, who is my life and soul? Has Krishna actually come before my eyes? As the spiritual master chastises the disciple and teaches him the art of devotional service, so all the ecstatic symptoms of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, including despondency, moroseness, humility, restlessness, joy, endurance, and anger, all instructed his body and mind. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed his time. He also passed his time reading the books and singing the songs of Chandidas and Vidyapati, and listening to quotations from the Jagannath Ballabha Nataka, Krishna Caritamrita, and Gita Govinda. Thus, in the association of Swarup Damodar and Roy Ramananda, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed his days and nights chanting and hearing with great pleasure. Reading the books, Chandidas Vidyapati, Roy Ramananda Giti. Caritamrita, Sri Gita Govinda, Swarup Ramananda Samlah Prabhu Bhatri Devi, Gaya Shuni Parama Ananda. Prabhupada is talking about reading the books and singing the songs. We're singing songs, they're reading books. Seems Srila Prabhupada added that he was reading the books of Chandidas and Vidyapati, but only listening to shlokas from the other books. Among his associates, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enjoyed paternal loving affection. We spoke about this. Enjoyed paternal loving affection with Paramananda Puri, friendly affection with Ramananda Roy, unalloyed service from Govinda and others, and humors of conjugal love with Gadadhar, Jagadananda, and Swarup Damodar. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enjoyed all these four mellows, and thus he remained obliged to his devotees. Paramananda Puri is said to have been Uddhava in Vrindavan. His affection with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were on the platform of paternal love. This was because Paramananda Puri happened to be the godbrother of the spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Similarly, Ramananda Roy, who's considered an incarnation of Arjuna, and by son an incarnation of Vishaka Devi, enjoyed unalloyed fraternal love with the Lord. Unalloyed personal service was enjoyed by Govinda and others. In the presence of his most confidential devotees like Gadadhar Pandit, Jagadananda, and Swarup Damodar, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enjoyed the ecstatic conditions of Srimati Radharani and her conjugal relationship with Krishna. Absorbed in these four transcendental mellows, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu resided in Jagannath Puri, feeling very much obliged to his devotees. Well, we discussed that. Because the general understanding is that all devotees have a relationship with Lord Chaitanya of servitude. And through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they then will enter into the other moods in Vrindavan. I'm trying to remember how we resolved this. I think we resolved it now. He's enjoying fraternal, paternal, conjugal. What does that mean? Is he enjoying, conjugal relationship like Krishna? Obviously not. But in terms of discussion or exchange.
Together with them, he's tasting varieties according to the particular devotee who's around him.
Although Paramananda Puri is very interesting because Uddhava was his peer and very close friend, cousin. How is it that now he's promoted to a paternal relationship, parental relationship?
Maybe because he happened to be the godbrother of Ishwara Puri, so he got his status changed.
That means that they're changeable.
With Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he breaks all the rules. Anything is possible.
Yes, so devotees shouldn't think that, as with Krishna, Krishna behaves with someone as a parent, sits in their lap and so on, or in the conjugal relationship, then he dances with the gopis, so he's not doing that with Gadadhar Pandit, Jagannananda, Swarup Damodar, who are all men, but rather right here with Swarup Damodar, and then perhaps in other ways that we don't hear so much with Gadadhar Pandit and Jagannananda. He discusses the intimate topics of Krishna's conjugal pastimes. Lila Shuka, Bilvamangal Thakur, was an ordinary human being, yet he developed many ecstatic symptoms in his body. Yes. What then is so astonishing about these symptoms being manifest in the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? In the ecstatic mood of conjugal love, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was on the highest platform. Therefore, all the exuberant ecstasies were naturally visible in his body. Purport. Lila Sukha is Bilvamangal Thakur Goswami. He was a South Indian, a Brahmin, and his former name was Shilhan Mishra. When he was a householder, he became attracted to a prostitute named Chintamani, but eventually he took her advice and became renounced. Thus he wrote one book, Shanti Shataka, and later, by the mercy of Lord Krishna and the Vaishnavas, he became a great devotee. Thus he became famous as Bilvamangal Thakur Goswami. On that elevated platform, he wrote a book named Krishna Caritamrita, which is very famous amongst Vaishnavas. Since he exhibited so many ecstatic symptoms, people used to call him Lila Shuka. During his previous pastimes in Vrindavan, Lord Krishna desired to enjoy the three different types of ecstasy, but despite great endeavor, he could not taste them. Such ecstasies are the monopoly of Srimati Radharani. Therefore, in order to taste them, Sri Krishna accepted the position of Srimati Radharani in the form of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. By personally tasting the mellows of love of Godhead, Caitanya Mahaprabhu taught his direct disciples the process. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is the most munificent incarnation of the touchstone of love of God. He does not consider whether one is a proper or improper recipient, but gives his treasure to anyone and everyone. Thus he is the most munificent. So this sentence, phrase, he taught his direct disciples the process. In Caitanya Caritamrita, Lord Chaitanya's teaching the readers the process of loving Krishna. And therefore, however, we may think that this is, above our heads, but ultimately these are lessons that are being given to us by the Lord to actually follow. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's capital is the touchstone of love of Godhead, and consequently, he is the great owner of that transcendental treasure. That's fantastic. The capital is the touchstone of love of Godhead. After making unlimited amounts of gold, the touchstone remains the same. Similarly, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, although distributing love of Godhead unlimitedly, still remained the supreme owner of this transcendental opulence. His devotees who learned it from him also had to distribute it munificently all over the world. This Krishna consciousness movement, following in the footsteps of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and his confidential devotees, is also trying to distribute love of Godhead all over the world through the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. No one, not even Lord Brahma, can ascertain or even taste a drop of this confidential ocean of ecstasy. But Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, out of his causeless mercy, has distributed this love of Godhead all over the world. Thus, there cannot be any incarnation more munificent than Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. There is no greater donor. Who can describe his transcendental qualities?
So again and again we're being instructed that we're dealing with matters that, for example, even Lord Brahma can't ascertain or taste a drop of this confidential ocean of ecstasy. But meanwhile, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is distributing it all over the world without any discrimination, not considering whether one is a proper or improper recipient. He gives his treasure to anyone and everyone. Thus he is the most munificent. So how to practically apply that? We're followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How do we just distribute to anyone and everyone without considering who is a proper or improper recipient?
Because you can get at the end, through the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Anyone can chant, and that becomes their means for attaining love of God.
I was thinking that at the Ratha Yatra Saturday, how someone could just be wandering through by chance, as the Shastra says, yadicchaya, by chance, just wandering. It seems by chance, but actually there's always a purpose. It's, sometimes Yudhishthira is translated as by accident, but then the Acharyas always explain that it's there's always some intent, some purpose behind it all. So someone's just ambling along on a Saturday afternoon, and what is this? And there's no question of their qualification or lack of qualification.
Yeah.
Suddenly they're immersed in the sounds, smells, and they're practically rubbing shoulders with devotees as they walk around from tent to tent. So I was thinking of that, how this is such a festival, is an example of indiscriminately distributing Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And then yesterday I came to the temple room, and while there were tours going on, and I didn't know. I saw so many of the people wearing these
Jumpsuits.
Yeah, I thought this is some traditional Hungarian attire. And then the tour guide devotee explained to me that for the pleasure of the deities, or for respect toward the deities, they cover up. So, just ordinary persons just standing in front of Shri Radha Shamsundar, and they just think, oh, we're going to tour a nice place, we heard about it. But meanwhile, they enter the rarest situation. So there's another example, I thought, of how Lord Chaitanya's mercy is distributed without discrimination. Of course, if they don't agree to put on those, then they can't come in the temple room. But that's their choice. But many do, and they stand in front of the deities, and the tour guide is telling them, and the devotee is at the book table there, and so all these arrangements indicate the indiscriminate distribution of Lord Chaitanya's mercy. I remember an example from Montreal, since you are related to Montreal. Remember the devotee Nanda Kishore, our godbrother? He told me himself personally, he was in a hotel room with Prabhupada in Montreal, and
Nanda Kishore, Nandishwar.
Nanda Kishore, I believe.
Nanda Kishore.
Yeah. And all of a sudden in the hotel room, Prabhupada started laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing, and his devotees were just watching him in amazement. He just laughed and laughed and wouldn't stop laughing. And then suddenly, after these minutes of just non-stop laughing, Prabhupada just stopped and said, "Once they come to Krishna, they are caught."
But in one form, there's no discrimination. So in the packaging of the holy name, or devotee association, or when people come here in front of the deities, they're really wonderstruck. They don't know what to say, what to do. They've never seen anything like that before. But then in another form, we have the 10 offenses, and then, to disclose the truths of Krishna consciousness to those who don't have the appropriate faith and the appropriate understanding, or to get into esoteric subject matter, that then becomes offensive. And that then becomes, if you don't discriminate there, then you become an offender. So in some form, you can be indiscriminate, holy name, Prabhupada's books, and so on. But in another, when you start engaging with others in topics that isn't actually suitable for them, then that becomes improper. So in one sense, you don't need to discriminate, in another one, you do. Isn't it?
Yes, this bhakti science requires maturity, and as we become older devotees, we need to be more responsible in terms of sensitivity. Sometimes devotees wonder, why is it that, as we were discussing the other night, last night, why is it I don't feel inspired anymore to do service, or I don't feel inspired to chant. I find that often this situation is because they lost their sensitivity toward devotional service. They didn't take it seriously enough. They just gradually, their initial novice attraction wore down, and they just started considering devotional service as, I'm told to do this, I'm told to do that, and this is what I have to do to remain part of the club, part of the association. They don't make an effort to go deeper. They don't make an effort to reaffirm their attraction. They just take it for granted, and gradually I see it wanes and wanes and wanes, and then as it's waning, it leads to offenses. So I often explain, I was speaking to Lila Sukha Prabhu's squadron of new devotees, how we have to make some effort. At some point, we have to muster or gather up our abilities and determinations and move forward. And sometimes, unfortunately, our devotees, they allow themselves to coast and don't start pushing down on the accelerator pedal themselves, and I've got to make an effort. So devotees were asking how to avoid that. And I answered that so much of your endeavor is based on whom you're associating with. So I find these readings that we're having very crucial, even though some of you may think the subject matter is so far beyond and even practically unattainable, but in such sessions as we're having here, you start to develop even the slightest or most subtle aspiration that yes, there's something inside you that's triggered. Yes, I'd like to be like that. I'd like to attain that. And as the super soul in your heart, Krishna notices that slightest fragrance. And according to his own timetable, he arranges. So it's not hopeless.
Which verse?
We're on '83.
Yeah.
Such topics are not to be discussed freely, because if they are, no one will understand them. Such are the wonderful pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Unto who is able to understand, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu has shown mercy by giving him the association of the servant of his own servant. Purport. An ordinary person cannot understand the transcendental ecstasies in the mode of Srimati Radharani. Unfit persons who try to understand them are perverted into the Sahajya, Baula, and other sampradayas. Thus the teachings are perverted. Even learned scholars in the academic field cannot understand the transcendental bliss and ecstasy exhibited by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and his pure devotees. One must be fit to understand the purport of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's activities.
So this is just, the verse itself is really repeating what you just said. That now we're talking about that, everyone is eligible for Lord Chaitanya's mercy, but then we say, well, but actually you can't discuss it freely. This is not something for a public Sunday program or some public lecture, going out and speaking to people, because people won't understand. So, but those who can understand, and na bhujaye, I would take that understanding means people who have faith in the topics, in the subject matter, whether they fully grasp the science or the devotion behind it is not necessarily the case, but at least that they have faith in it. Then what will happen? Then Lord Chaitanya will give them His mercy by giving him the association of the servant of his own servant. In other words, devotees will get the suitable association. Lord Chaitanya, for those who are really sincere and those who really want to actually understand, they have a desire to understand and they have faith, then it will happen by Sangha. Hoyatandra dasanudasa Sangha. So as Maharaja had said, that it's all in the association. Our advancement in spiritual life is really based on the quality of association that we get. Therefore, we have to get quality association, and we have to be quality association for others.
The pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu are the topmost of jewels. They have been kept in the storehouse of Swarup Damodara Goswami, who has explained them to Raghunath Das Goswami, who has repeated them to me. Whatever little I have heard from Raghunath Das Goswami, I have described in this book, which is presented to all devotees. Purport. All the activities of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu were noted by his personal secretary, Swarupa Damodara, and repeated to Raghunath Das Goswami, who memorized them. Whatever Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami heard is recorded in Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. This is called the Parampara system, from Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu to Swarupa Damodara to Raghunath Das Goswami to Kaviraj Goswami. Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami has distributed this information in his book Chaitanya Charitamrita. In other words, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is the essence of the instruction given through the Parampara system of the disciplic succession stemming from Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu.
One can imagine that for 6 years, night after night after night, this is sort of almost an unrelenting association of two persons, Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar Goswami. They're with Caitanya Mahaprabhu from sunset till whenever. Sometimes he would go to sleep, sometimes he would stay awake all through the night, and they would be with him. And so there's a lot of unpraised, undetailed things going on that obviously can't fit on the pages of just one book, Caitanya Caritamrita. Raghunath Das Goswami was Swarup Damodar Goswami's assistant, personal servant. So you can imagine that in the dead of night, Swarup Damodar Goswami goes back. He quickly makes notes in his notebook, and he also, Raghunath Das Goswami is there, and what happened? What happened? Tell me what happened. So who knows how long they stayed up explaining, and both between the notes and what he heard from Swarup Damodar, Raghunath Das Goswami made his own notes. And unfortunately, both of these are lost. That was the drawback in those days, that things were, just written by hand on these leaves, and if someone wanted them or had access to them, they could copy them, but obviously, if there were copies, they're lost too, or perhaps there were no copies made. We don't know. And then when Raghunath Das Goswami later came to Radhakund, then 3 hours a day, he says, what little I've heard, but he was listening 3 hours a day, and Raghunath Das Goswami's Bhajan Kutir was here, and Kaviraj Goswami was like the other side of the temple room. So he was that far away, that close. So they were, and Rupa Raghunath Pati. So they were like guru and disciple in one sense. And to be able to remember and write down, and Kaviraj Goswami make his own notes from what Raghunath Das had brought. Where are the notes that you brought? Where are the notes that you wrote in Puri? Oh, I don't know. They're lost. Swarup Damodar Goswami's notes are also lost. So a lot, we get the real essence here, but how these were then actually really described and elaborated. And of course the question always comes up whether, is this verbatim, or is this what Kaviraj Goswami remembers as it's coming through the parampara system. They certainly have the ability to remember things verbatim, because that's the Vedic system.
And then there's Madan Mohan deity, yes.
So, yes, association. You're reading, right?
If one says that Sri Caitanya Caritamrita is full of Sanskrit verses and therefore not understandable by a common man, I reply that what I have described are the pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and that for me to satisfy everyone is not possible. Purport. Srila Kaviraj Goswami and one who follows in his footsteps do not have to cater to the public. Their business is simply to satisfy the previous acharyas and describe the pastimes of the Lord. One who is able to understand can relish this exalted transcendental literature which is actually not meant for ordinary persons like scholars and literary men. Generally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, recorded in Caitanya Caritamrita, are studied in universities and scholastic circles from a literary and historical point of view. But actually, Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita is not a subject matter for research workers or literary scholars. It is simply meant for those devotees who have dedicated their lives to the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I've been told that even today in the schools in Bengal, they teach Caitanya Caritamrita as a literary gem. Obviously, they're not taking any transcendental import. And Prabhupada reaffirms at the end of the purport that Caitanya Caritamrita is simply meant for those devotees who have dedicated their lives to the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Really, in other words, who's dedicated their lives to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, to service, not part of the life, but the entire life, for actually giving Krishna consciousness to others. Because they're Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, because they're surrendered, therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will reciprocate with them. You were going to say something?
I was thinking how Prabhupada would say that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his leisure time, so to speak, would relish reading Caitanya Caritamrita. And I was also reading in Shamsundar Prabhu's memoirs of his association with Prabhupada as his secretary, that Prabhupada would sometimes have Caitanya Caritamrita read to him, and for quite some time. So by your arrangement, we're following in the most extraordinary footsteps.
And you're the one who selected the portion that we should read. What about this first part? One who follows in the footsteps do not have to cater to the public.
I was wondering about that too.
I mean, we have a certain fraction, or it may not be a fraction, maybe a certain part of the society who's very, very concerned about catering to the public.
Yes.
So isn't there a dividing line when you cater too much to the public and where you're not oblivious to what the public think, because ultimately we're out there with the public and we want them to be favorable.
Sounds like an issue, an acharya issue, because...
Acharya issue?
Yes, because there's no doubt, as you point out, in ISKCON today there is a difference between one camp, which one could call roughly and benignly the integrationists or the assimilationists, and the other camp, which you could call benignly and very roughly the standalone, or we want some distance between ISKCON and the general society. And so I see that kind of division on all levels. I suppose it's something that's natural when you have spiritual organizations. But I wonder if you just assimilate, integrate, what do you have left? So you and I were talking about the Amish and how they've survived against all odds and are expanding and growing. Of course, they don't preach, but they have big families. And at the beginning of the 20th century in the USA, there were just a few thousand of them. And they were predicted in the 1950s. PhD researchers studied them and said, you'll be finished in a few years. Now there's 250,000 of them. And they talk funny, they dress funny. They've got exemptions from the government about not sending anyone to the army. They have exemptions from the government about their children don't have to go to a regular school after the age of 13 or 14. And they have a 95% teenage retention rate. So there's an example of a religious culture that's maintaining its distinctiveness in a standoffish way. Of course, they don't preach. So this is what you said I find to be a very important question. I wonder if it will ever be resolved. That's why I was asking you about the first generation of children who grew up at New Vraja Dham, and I was very happy to hear how, for them, comparatively, many of them have retained their spiritual focus. But then again, to achieve that kind of goal takes a lot of structure, a lot of foresight, a lot of deliberation. That's what the Amish do. They deliberate every aspect of their interactions with the wider world.
How do they do that?
If we use this technology, will that affect our family structure, our community structure, our relationships? Those things always come first. The stability of the community, the stability of the family. It may be a convenience, but what's the trade-off?
And when it comes to convenience, they're still driving around in horse carriages. They don't drive cars. This is in the United States of America.
Yes, they're in the Gita Nagari area, our farm project in the USA, and they do construction work at Gita Nagari, and they refuse to charge more than they think the job is worth.
Or they put 10% on or fixed.
All I know is they just charge what they think is a fair price, and that's it. They don't, there's so many persons who want to hire us, so therefore we're going to make the price in capitalistic spirit. We'll make the price higher and higher. They don't do that. They have pride in their workmanship and their integrity. Whereas sometimes devotees, our own ISKCON devotees, would get angry that, well, you're hiring the Amish, what about us? But then when you do hire such devotees, they feel obligated to do very little for a very high price because we're all devotees. So it's amazing how they have maintained over the years, over the decades, such a intact culture in amidst such degrading circumstances that surround them.
There's a real difference between what we call being politically correct, in other words, just whatever is the popular trend, culture, that because we don't want to alienate people or have them think that we're too fundamentalists or too fanatics, that we go along with those things, but then in the process we end up compromising our values, compromising our lifestyle, our appearance, and ultimately our ability to practice Krishna consciousness.
Well, I've seen, as coming here for 20 years or so, I see how the Hungarian Yatra grew by, of course, vibrant preaching and outreach, but also not being afraid to draw the line and saying, this far and no more. And for many parts of the ISKCON world, that's hard to do. To draw the line and say, that's it.
And once you've crossed the line, it's really hard to come back. Let's see. These are... They're still quite... Oh. Let's finish the chapter.
All right.
There's a few verses.
You want?
86.
In this Caitanya Caritamrita, there is no contradictory conclusion, nor is anyone else's opinion accepted. I have written this book to describe the simple substance as I've heard it from superiors. If I become involved in someone's likes and dislikes, I cannot possibly write the simple truth.
I mean, that's pretty simple, pretty clear how to function.
Purport. The simplest thing for human beings is to follow their predecessors. Judgment according to mundane senses is not a very easy process. Whatever is awakened by attachment to one's predecessor is the way of devotional service, as indicated by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu.
Awakened by attachment to one's predecessors. Interesting.
The author says, however, that he cannot consider the opinions of those who become attracted or repelled by such things, because one cannot write impartially in that way. In other words, the author is stating that he did not inject personal opinion in the Caitanya Caritamrita. He has simply described his spontaneous understanding from superiors. If he had been carried away by someone's likes and dislikes, he could not have written of such a sublime subject matter in such an easy way. The actual facts are understandable to real devotees. When these facts are recorded, they are very congenial to the devotees, but one who is not a devotee cannot understand. Such is the subject matter for realization. Mundane scholarship and its concomitant attachments and detachments cannot arouse spontaneous love of Godhead. Such love cannot be described by a mundane scholar. If one does not understand in the beginning, but continues to hear again and again, the wonderful effects of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes will bring love for Krishna. Gradually, one will come to understand the loving affairs between Krishna and the gopis and other associates of Vrindavan. Everyone is advised to continue to hear over and over again in order to greatly benefit.
Not just read once, but over and over again.
In reply to those critics who say that Sri Caitanya Caritamrita is full of Sanskrit verses, it can be said that Srimad Bhagavatam is also full of Sanskrit verses.
Nothing else.
As are the commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam. Nonetheless, Srimad Bhagavatam can be understood by everyone, as well as by advanced devotees who study the Sanskrit commentaries. Why, then, will people not understand the Caitanya Caritamrita? There are only a few Sanskrit verses, and these have been explained in the Bengali vernacular. What is the difficulty in understanding?
Seems like there must have been already, when he was writing the book, some people were telling him, no, there's too much Sanskrit in here.
I've already given a synopsis of all the facts and figures of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's last pastimes, and I have a desire to describe them elaborately. If I remain longer and am fortunate enough to receive the mercy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I shall try to describe them again more elaborately. He does that in Lila, more elaborately. I have now become too old and disturbed by invalidity. While I write, my hands tremble. I cannot remember anything, nor can I see or hear properly. Still I write, and this is a great wonder. In this chapter, I have to some extent described the essence of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya at the end. If I die in the meantime and cannot describe them in detail, at least the devotees will have this transcendental treasure. In this chapter, I have briefly described the Lila. Whatever I have not described, I shall describe extensively in the future. If, by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, I live for so many days that I can fulfill my desires, I will give full consideration to these pastimes. I worship herewith the lotus feet of all kinds of devotees, both advanced and neophyte. I request all of them to be satisfied with me. I am faultless because I have written herein whatever I have understood from Sri Damodar Goswami and Rupa and Raghunath Das Goswamis. I have neither added to nor subtracted from their version. Go on.
Yeah, let's finish.
All right.
It's only turn the page and you finish.
Okay. I worship herewith the lotus feet of all kinds of devotees. Oh, I read that. Purport. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, there are three kinds of devotees, known as Bhajana Vigya, experts in devotional service, Bhajana Shila, devotees engaged in devotional service, and Krishna Name Dikshita, Krishna Nama Kari, initiated devotees engaged in chanting. The author of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita begs the mercy of all these devotees and asks them to be pleased with him. He says, let the neophyte devotees, the devotees who are very expert in arguing, though they have no sense of advanced devotional service, who think themselves very advanced because they imitate some smarta brahmana, let such devotees not be displeased with me, thinking I have committed errors in this regard. I beg their pardon with great humility, but I am submitting that I personally have no desire to add or subtract anything. I have only written what I have heard in the simplest succession because I am dedicated to the lotus feet of previous acharyas like Sri Damodar, Raghunath Das Goswami, and Rupa Goswami. I have only written what I have learned from them. According to the Parampara system, I wish to take the dust from the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Prabhu, and all the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like Sri Damodar, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and Raghunath Das Goswami. I wish to take the dust of their lotus feet upon my head. In this way, I wish to be blessed with their mercy. Receiving orders from the above authorities and the Vaishnavas of Vrindavan, especially from Haridas, the priest of Govindaji, I, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, have tried to describe one small particle of one drop, of one wave of the ocean of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Thus end the Bhakti Vedanta purports to Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita, Madhya Lila, 2nd chapter, describing the ecstatic manifestations of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Hare Krishna. We're reading when this part about not adding, not changing, not. I remembered this one event. I was in Vrindavan, in the house where myself and Govinda Maharaj stay, and he wasn't there, and I was there alone, and there was this knocking at the gate. So I went out to the gate. It was like sort of this time in the evening, and there's this sadhu over there, and he says, "Can I come in?" I said, "Right." Come in, and so I sit him down. I give him some water, and I ask him what can I do for him, and out on the porch, and he says, "I'm publishing. I want to publish an edition of Caitanya Caritamrita, and I wonder if you'd help me." Of course, that means, well, you give me money. and I say, "Well, you know, we have our Caitanya Caritamrita." He says, "I know, but there are some mistakes that your spiritual master made, and I'm going to give the corrected version." So I was looking at him, and politely I said, "You're telling me my guru has made mistakes, and you want me to give you money?" And he just sort of like looked, and I guess he concluded that this one knocked on the wrong door. And then he quickly drank his water and then left. But I didn't get into detail of, some of the things he was talking about, the historical dating of Lord Chaitanya's travels and so on. Yeah, we just... Prabhupada was like that. He, and even to the extent of he's not had to ignore often his own godbrothers, which is a difficult thing to do, because he was doing the right thing and doing what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted, and it worked, which becomes Halena Parichayate. You judge a thing by its result. As you're talking about Amish, for instance, even Islam, it is a wide-spreading religion. While on the other hand, our Krishna consciousness movement isn't, well, certainly not spreading like it did in the 60s and 70s. And it's rare that we tie the two together, that maybe we're making too many compromises, and that's why it's not spreading, rather than actually being very people-like it. People like when religious organizations stick to their values, don't compromise, and that ultimately we have our own culture, we have our own way of life, we have our way of dress. This is who we are. And we have Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Yes. Hare Krishna. Caritamrita Maharaj is leaving after lunch tomorrow.
I thank you all for your kind association. I thank the Bulgarian contingent for coming all the way from Bulgaria. They're so happy. Their first visit to New Vraja Dham. It's an 8-hour drive to Sofia, and for those who don't have EU passports, they have to go through Romania, so it's 12 hours. But they're all very enlivened by their stay here, and they want to leave here early tomorrow morning so they can just get a glimpse of the Budapest temple. I told them it's like a museum of modern art. So I thank you again, and of course I'm grateful to His Holiness Sivarama Maharaj for his association.
Next time I can stay longer and we can do like a saptaha.
Yes, it's been very tasty. in all ways. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai Devamrita Swami Maharaj ki jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
I mean, it's still different, you know, being in front of an audience.
Different from what?
Different from not being in front of an audience.
Okay.